Alright, David Harry here, and this video had a very simple and easy thing to do in it, which was to test a T7 here, a Samsung T7, to see if it could record 4K 120 frames per second ProRes from an iPhone 16 Pro Max. So this should have just been a very straightforward, easy test to see how long it could record for. However, a number of weird things come up during this test, so the video is actually a fair bit longer than what I intended it to be. However, if you are interested in such things and you may be wanting to record 4K 120 and use it within DaVinci Resolve, I think you might want to watch the best part of this video, because there were some weird results going on, and in the end I even had to test out the Blackmagic Camera App in order to basically get things working. Anyway, let me get into this video and I will come back at the end for a short summary. Okay, so as we can see here then, this is the iPhone 16 Pro Max with the T7 attached to it. Now at the moment I've obviously just got the T7 shoved in between the grip here and the actual phone. However, you can obviously connect T7s directly either to an iPhone or a MagSafe compatible case by using things such as magnetic rings on the T7, or indeed you could just mount it on, like, you know, your camera rigging. In this instance I could obviously get a little grip system and mount it to the cold shoe, or you can use quarter 20s and stuff. However, this video is not about how to mount the T7, but as to whether or not it is going to work for doing the 124K ProRes. So what I'm going to do here is just turn this around. Hopefully we're getting some focus there. Now let me just explain quickly what's going on here. So I've got the iPhone pointed at my monitor, and my monitor has got a edit on it from Resolve. This is just one of my other things that I've done for my other channel, and I'm now just getting that playing on a loop. So what I'm going to do is get the iPhone to record the screen so that we've actually got some meaningful stuff going on where the iPhone's definitely looking at things that are moving. So rather than just sitting there and pointing the iPhone at a static object and then seeing how long it records for, and trying to emulate, you know, some kind of movement within the recording, which is typical of what you would do if you were using it properly for a recording. Now as we can see here, I have got the iPhone set to 120 frames per second, 4K. I'm also in ProRes HDR as well, just for good measure. Now on the screen right now, you're going to see that it says 34 minutes worth of record time. Now as far as that record time is concerned, I actually did format the T7 and I just did a 1 minute test recording. So basically you will get 35 minutes worth of blank space, as it were, on a 1TB T7 at 124K ProRes HDR. That is just down to 34 minutes just purely because I'd already done a quick test recording to make sure everything was all set up. Anyway, what I'm going to do here is just hit record on the iPhone. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of speed through this and let's see how far we get. Now there are two things here. Will the T7 last that long with the recording, and also will this camera that I'm recording on actually last that long? Unfortunately, what it is, I'm using a ZV-1 here and the batteries are not particularly that good for the ZV-1, so we might be limited either to the runtime for the ZV-1 or the record time here for the iPhone. But regardless, we should get a good idea of what the length of this recording is going to be. So let me just start fast forwarding. Okay, so I'm going to come back in here now, and as we can see, it is over 31 minutes long, close to 32 minutes at this point, with a single take recording. Now, we'll have to stop it here right now for two reasons. One, my ZV-1, which is actually doing the filming of the iPhone, is getting close to the end of its battery, and I don't want to lose that recording. Plus, I'm not entirely sure what will happen once we fill right up to 34 minutes on the iPhone iPhone itself with the T7. However, as we can clearly see there hasn't been an issue doing that one long single take of 4K 120 ProRes in HDR as well. So obviously this is definite proof that the T7 is usable. Anyway, what I will do now is just cut away and go to an end summary. Actually, I'm just going to have to come back here with some bad news. I've just hit stop on the record button and look at this message here. Slow recording speed. The external storage device or USB cable does not have a fast enough write speed to support external recording. What I don't understand there is why it let me go through half an hour and not tell me that it was incapable of doing the recording, and it's only come up with that message at the end of the recording. Now, I still don't know as to whether or not that is correct. So what I'm going to do now is just throw this footage into the timeline on DaVinci Resolve. Okay, so I am now over onto my Mac, and there are some really interesting things going on here, although I should really say interesting problems. So let me show you. So I've got MediaInfo open here. Now I'm just going to go to the T7 drive here. Now as you can see, this says T7 exFAT. That's just because I formatted it to exFAT, which is perfectly fine for these things. Now let me just open up the drive here. I'll go into the DSIM folder and the Apple folder. So I'm just going to drag the file into MediaInfo. Now look here. This is saying that the frame rate is 98.943 frames per second. Now that's a very odd frame rate for a start, so that's suggesting that there is some kind of weirdness going on with the frame rate within the file. I'm not suggesting that this is a variable frame rate by any stretch. However, it is definitely nowhere near 120 frames per second, and as we can see here, it is definitely 4K UHD. Now just to double down on the weirdness, just going to go into DaVinci Resolve here. Now, if I have a look at the file within DaVinci Resolve, and then if I just go to the file manager here or the file inspector, as we can see, this also says it is 100 frames per second. Now, interestingly, when I started this Resolve project, what happened was I just kind of like pulled the file in and then let Resolve set itself to the frame rate of the file. So if I come down here to the settings, as we can see here, Resolve automatically set itself to 100 frames per second. So as far as Resolve is concerned, this is a 100 frames per second file. Now let me just come out of here. Now the interesting thing is, aside for the temporal difference between like what I was filming and what the frame rate was set to within the iPhone, it does seem to have recorded, and as we can see here, it's actually recorded an entire file. So I'm not entirely sure what that message at the end of the recording was about, because it does seem to have recorded. However, it has recorded something that isn't correct. Now, if I just try playing a little bit on the timeline here, it is not going to look great on the playback here for a number of reasons. And like I've just said, the main reason there is because temporally the source is different than the recording. Because we weren't recording something that was like 120 frames, as it were, it will look a bit odd. But nonetheless, this actually all looks like the file was recorded, but just wasn't recorded properly. Now, this was with Apple's own basic iPhone video camera app. So what I'm going to do now is to do the same test, but I will use the Blackmagic Camera App, and with that app we actually have a function where we can say to it, stop recording on dropped frames. So let me just get into that and let's see how that gets on. Okay, so I am now over onto the Blackmagic Camera App, and what I'm going to do here is to run through a bunch of the settings just so that we know exactly what's going on. And if we hear a noise in the background, unfortunately that's the fan off me Ninja. I'm just doing a safety recording here as I'm doing this just in case. Anyways, as far as the settings are concerned, as we can see here, the codec is set to Apple ProRes 422HQ. The resolution is set to 4K. The color space is set to Apple Log HDR. Now, the most important thing here for this particular test is the setting at the bottom, which says if media drops frame, and I've said stop recording if that happens. Now, to be clear, what that means is that if the Blackmagic Camera App senses even just one dropped frame as it is writing the data to the T7, that will then stop recording, and if it does that, that will be a clear indication that the T7 cannot sustain the necessary bitrate in order to do this type of recording. Anyway, I'm just going to pop over onto media here, and as we will see, it says save clips to, so I'm just going to tap into there, and as we can see, I've got a folder here that says Blackmagic. Now if I just tap on that, it's going to show us that that is indeed on the T7 there. So let me just pop back here. I'm just going to go now onto the camera. Now, as far as the camera is set up, as we can see here, hopefully in the top corner, it is set to FPS 120, so 120 frames per second, and we already know it's in 4K and everything else. Now, as far as what we're seeing on the screen is concerned, this is a slightly wider picture, and the reason why is because I've switched off the stabilizer for this. I just would use this app without the stabilizer mostly, because I would normally have the camera locked off or the phone locked off anyway. However, I am still recording a bunch of stuff in the middle of the screen to basically simulate a proper recording. Now, as far as the recording is concerned, do not worry about the picture, the quality, anything like that. It has got nothing to do with the test. We just want to see if we can sustain that 120 frames per second in 4K using ProRes and stuff. So on that point, let me just hit record. Okay, so that's going to start recording, and I will do the same thing. I will allow this to just carry on recording, and let's see how far we get. Now, I may still have an issue with the battery on my ZV-1, which is recording the iPhone, but you know, whatever happens here, whether or not we filled up the T7 or whether I have to stop recording, if it is going to record a long take, then we're going to get like a pretty long take anyway. So, you know, we're going to get something good out of it if it can do it. And also, what's encouraging is that we have not hit a dropped frame so far, so this is suggesting that this could work. Anyway, let me just speed through this and let's see how far we get on. Okay, so I'm going to come straight back in here because we have now got a message on the screen saying recording stopped, and it says recording has stopped due to an unknown error. Well, I'm going to suggest that that unknown error is the dropped frame and some kind of like, you know, inability to sustain the necessary bitrate to the T7 for the recording. However, we did get 1 minute and 45 seconds out of it by the looks of it, but what I'm going to do is just test this file in DaVinci Resolve anyway. Okay, so I am now back over onto the Mac again. I've once again got MediaInfo open, so I'll check the file in there first. So what I'm going to do is open up the T7. There's the Blackmagic folder that I'd created on the T7. Let me just click into here. Now there is the single file I've just recorded. However, there is a proxy folder here. Now if I click into here, as we can see, there are no proxies. Now the reason why I'm showing you that is just so that you know that there wasn't like a proxy being generated and also written to the disk at the same time as like the full resolution version. So essentially nothing else could have been getting in the way of the bitrate and stuff as the main file was being written to the T7. Now if I drag this over onto MediaInfo, we are going to see here that the file is 120.138 frames per second. I'm not too sure why it's saying 0.138. However, the 120, that's kind of going to be good enough for me at this point. Now what I'm going to do is get into DaVinci Resolve and let's have a look at what's going on there. Okay, now the first thing that I'm going to do here is to show you the version of Resolve that I am on, and that is Studio 19. And if I just do a check for an update, there are no updates available, and I am on 19.0.1. Now, the reason why I am showing you that is because if there were some weird incompatibility issues between the way that the iPhone base app is creating the ProRes files, and maybe it might have an issue within Resolve, I'm just letting you know what version of Resolve that I am on with that. However, the file wasn't being read properly or identified properly within MediaInfo either. So what I'm getting at there is that I'm not entirely sure as to whether or not there is an incompatibility issue between the files written with the base app inside of the iPhone when they are being read by MediaInfo or Resolve. I just think that there was something really screwy going on with the recording, and indeed the recording itself may have been incorrect, and if so, that was definitely down to the Apple Camera app. Anyways, let me carry on here and let's see what's going on. I'm just going to come up here to the file inspector, and as we can see, this is saying 120 frames per second. It's also Apple ProRes 422 HQ, and that is exactly how it was identified as well within MediaInfo. Now, if I just open up the project settings, as we can see here, the project is set to 120, and that was actually selected by the project. So just to be clear, when I started the project, I didn't set the frame rate. I just dragged in the first piece of media, and obviously at that point, Resolve will give you the option to set the frame rate to the first clip that comes in, and that's exactly what I've just done there. So one, it is identified it as 120, and two, it's set its own playback frame rate to 120. All of which is correct. Now, if I just come back to the timeline here, the file itself is perfectly playable and stuff directly from the T7. Now, I'm just going to play a little bit here, and once again, because of all the temporal differences here between the source only being like 24 frames per second and, you know, we're recording at 120, it's definitely going to look a bit odd. However, you know, the file has worked properly up until the point where it stopped. Now, what's weird here, and I don't know what this is about, I think the camera app, did that say the file was 1 minute and 45 seconds? Well, when I've got it inside here, it is saying that the file is 1 minute and 36 seconds. Now, my recollection of what the actual record time was on the iPhone might be wrong, but if I was right, then yes, there are differences there between the record time and what Resolve is saying the file is playing back at as far as its record length is concerned. So yeah, you know, is that something that we should be worried about? I'm not entirely sure, and at this point I'm not going to go deep diving on it. However, I think I have now proven the point that this video was set out to find, and that was, can you record 120 frames per second in 4K using ProRes using a T7? And the answer to that is probably yeah, for short clips maybe, but not for any kind of sustained recording. Anyway, let me get on to a summary for this video. Okay, so to an end summary, and I'm going to keep this quite short because, you know, there's not really else much that I can say beyond what we've just seen there. But I think my takeaway from this is that I'm quite confused, because this should have been a very simple test, but those weird results using the Apple app were just really strange. I don't even want to hazard any guesses at this point. I just do not have enough data in front of me to work out what was going on. But the app was actually, you know, saying 120 frames per second before I hit the record button, but the file come back definitely at 100 or around 100. Now, I don't know, maybe does the app sense what the speed is on like the drive that it's connected to, and maybe does it automatically drop to a lower frame rate? Well, if so, why doesn't it tell you? And if so, then why did it still come up with an error at the end? Now, that's just pure guessing on my part, obviously, because like I say, there just isn't enough information there for me to work anything out, but it was really weird nonetheless. And then as far as that weird anomaly was concerned using the Blackmagic Camera app, that one really threw me, because the app definitely was working, and it definitely worked because you know that, because it basically said, right, you can't record this file, your SSD isn't fast enough, so I'm going to stop. Now at that point, that definitely will have recorded every frame up to the point where it stopped. Now the thing is, it said that it was 1 minute 45 worth of recording, but when I brought it into the timeline, what was it? 1 minute 35, 1 minute 36. I haven't got a clue what that is about at all whatsoever. And don't forget, the camera app definitely was saying 120 frames per second, and also Resolve said 120 frames per second, so they should have all matched up. I mean, I don't know, maybe there is some kind of a slight write buffer there or something, and maybe the reader head is kind of like, you know, done by so many frames or something. I don't know. Again, I'm just clutching at straws there, but maybe that would, like, you know, say why they were different in time between the recording and between the timeline, just simply because maybe the buffer kind of truncates itself if there's an error. I don't know. Anyways, the bottom line here is that my head is absolutely battered, because this should have been one of the easiest tests and easiest videos that I could have done to do with recording video to an external SSD, but it wasn't. Anyway, right, so what I'm going to do is do a bunch more videos about these things. I will also be showing an SSD that definitely will do 4K 120 ProRes and a bunch of other stuff as well. I'll probably compare the two iPhones together as well, the 15 Pro Max and the 16 Pro Max. Where have I got the 15? There it is. So I've got a 15 Pro Max there, so I might do some camera tests and stuff like that, and also do some kind of like workflow stuff and things like that as well. So if you're into that type of stuff, defo keep an eye on the channel. There'll also be some like Amazon links in the video description below for stuff used within this video. Now, if you've liked the video, please do give it a thumbs up. A sub to the channel will be absolutely tremendous. I'm David Harry. Thank you very much for watching this video. Take care and goodbye now.